Hi, Gavin.
What's going on, man? What's going on? Happy to be here. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. A little tired, very busy, but busy is good. So
What time is it there right now?
it's only 1:47 in the afternoon, which is not late at all. But I've had lots of errands to run, and the past couple weeks I've been swamped with tons of work and filming and stuff. But like I said, it's good. It's a healthy busy. How about yourself? What's life look like right now?
Life's good. That's chill.
Yeah,
I've seen you've been doing like the whole thing with your videos and stuff.
trying to. Yeah, trying to. Um, Right now, I am so before I was hiring someone to come in and help me film and he would edit, but it was too expensive. So what I've done now is I've invested in some of my own equipment and really all the work is in the pre-production. That way the filming and the content is quality. And so that's where all my focus has been. So yeah, this past month I started rolling out at least one video per week, and so far we're doing pretty good. I mean, we've grown by about 1,000 subscribers. People I think are really resonating with what we've been putting out, which is great. And hopefully I can keep this up.
I've seen you work without script.
Yeah, definitely no script. The closest I come to something that's outlined is, let's say, a couple days before I shoot, I will plan out the topic and then I'll create, for example, like the intro or the hook. So a good example would be, here's the 7 things that I use to do XYZ, right? We have that there, and then I list out those 7 things, and then I'll create, let's say, like the major points of discussion for each of those things. And so I just rehearse that. And then once I'm filming, dude, like this is stuff that I do every day. I live this, so it's not like it's more of like a conversation that I'm having with somebody else. I'm not talking about anything that I haven't lived through or haven't studied. So
Maybe it is just an impression for me. I've been there in the US. I was there when I was like 17. I was in Boston and New York, and I had this feeling all the time like you people there in the US are like so good at talking, like when explaining your own ideas, when talking to others, when making clear what you want, what you don't want. Like you guys are so talkative.
I think language itself has a big that plays a big role, right? So there's that. But then the other bit to it, if I had to comment on that at all, look, I don't know too much about like a foreign culture outside of the US. There's lots of different cultures in the US, but something that's home based, like if I were living in Spain, would look very different than people who speak Spanish and who have a Spanish culture here in the US, right? So I can't speak on that. But what I will say is in the US, it's very individualistic. So you're raised to be able to express yourself in a way that's going to accomplish what it is you're trying to accomplish. So, for example, if you need food, you need to ask for food, right? And when you ask for food, what kind of food do you want? You need to be very clear because most people aren't going to go out of their way to help you, right? So you are responsible for yourself. And so that individualistic culture, that's kind of what you're raised in. But I will say that at least throughout school, there's a lot of what's the word? There's a lot of like group work and presentation work and stuff that we do, and so I think that definitely contributes to it. But dude, not everybody is like that though. Some people, I think it's just personality. Most people that you see are probably people that are in this line of work, and so naturally they're gonna seem better than most. Um, but I'm not as good as I'd like to be when it comes to public speaking and YouTube and all that stuff. It's a process, just like anything else.
You're doing great, I think.
Thank you, thank you.
And first of all, I would like you to just introduce yourself, like for a non-powerlifting audience, you know, like for someone who doesn't even know what a squat is, what bench press is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you giving me that opportunity. So yeah, so my name is Gavin Adin. I'm 26 years old. For those who aren't in the powerlifting space, I compete in powerlifting, which is basically your best squat, bench, and deadlift in a competition. They've got referees, jury, the whole thing. And I compete internationally. So I compete at a pretty high level. I am from the US and I have been competing for about, I want to say 5 years now. Since beginning, I've won a junior world championship and I've set a couple open world records, which is pretty cool. I've competed at the Sheffield, which I'm sure we're going to talk about later in this podcast, but I've competed at the Sheffield twice, placed there once. But outside of powerlifting, I'm a brother. I've got 3 younger siblings. I've got 2 wonderful parents. I've got a beautiful girlfriend. So I care a lot about my relationships, and I consider myself to be, an entrepreneur. So I'm involved in several businesses, one of which is a training app, like most coaches. I also just recently launched my own gym chalk, Iron Claw Gym Chalk, and I've got a couple of other creative projects in the loop, which then kind of brings me back around to the last piece that fills up my time, which is content. So I do a lot of content creation, and I work with a lot of brands globally to help them expand their reach and exposure.
And of all of them, what would you say that has been your favorite competition so far?
Um, so it's tough because the ones that were the biggest failures had the biggest impact because I learned the most. But the ones that were my biggest successes, although I didn't learn as much, obviously they had a positive impact on my career. Um, I would say the very first SBD Sheffield was probably one of my favorite meets because I think it had a bit of both. It had some really great positives and some really great negatives. Although we did, yes, 2023, exactly. Although we fell short of some major goals, we still did extremely well, and I think it set the tone and set the pacing for some things, and so I think it did accomplish both. So I would say that meet for sure.
And coming back to this 2024, how you describe this past year for you as a competitor?
Definitely not satisfied. Yeah, definitely not satisfied. I don't really think much happened in 2024. I think that we kind of fell short of some major goals in 2024 and had more sharpening to do. So, for example, 2024 Sheffield, we did okay. I think we could have at least placed second slash maybe even contended for first. But something happened obviously with that third bench, and we definitely had more on our pull. So again, not to get too nitty gritty, but there was loss there. And then obviously nationals 5 weeks later, I missed weight. So that's not great. I didn't even give myself the opportunity to compete at the world championship and then earn my way back to Sheffield and all that. So that's not great. And then, we competed at NAPF, which was phenomenal. I mean, it was an international meet, international referees, judges, and we did well. I had more in the tank. We purposefully did not want to overstretch on our third pull specifically because we wanted the 901. But we did well. We, as a result of it, kind of became like a pseudo official number 193, but it's not really because we didn't go to Worlds to do it, but you get what I mean. We had the highest total in the 93s as a result of it. We set 2 open world records there, which was great. And that was awesome. That was a great experience, but by no means was enough for me to walk away from that feeling like, yes, I finally did it. That's just, I've been saying this for the last 2 years now. 900 should be the baseline for all 93s. 900 is not enough. And so what's
I
that?
firmly think that, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. 900 is should be the absolute baseline because you have to think about it. 10 times body weight total is pretty strong. That's pretty impressive, right? A 10 times body weight total is 30 kilos away from 900. That's a lot. So that means that most of us, if we're going to be elite, the best in the world, we should be at least 915, 920 regularly. Because again, we're supposed to be the best. I would even argue that 930 should be the minimum. Should be, because if you're the best, then that a 10 times body weight is really good. So that's where my thought process stems from. But yeah, so like I said, I thought NAPF was a great meet, but at the same time, plenty of mistakes that were made, and plenty of things to work on as a result of it. So by no means am I satisfied with that.
Most likely 900 won't be enough this year to qualify, right?
Oh yeah, we definitely need more than that for sure, 100%. Yeah. That was, I mean, really too. I think the goal going into NAPF was 923, and the only reason why we decided against stretching for that was because squats. Something happened with my recomp where the electrolytes I took in was too concentrated, and so the entire meet I couldn't hold on to anything. I was basically just like, not to be gross, but I was basically like shitting myself. every 5 seconds. And so I couldn't hold on to any fluids, and my stomach was all messed up. So that really messed up my squats. And I wasn't really sure how things were going to be affected going into deadlift. So we decided to secure the world record on the second attempt and then secure 901 on the third, as opposed to securing 901 on the second and then going for whatever we have on the third. And I think that was a smart move. But yeah.
So you think you had more in the tank that day, the 901 day?
Yes. Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, I've seen your pools have been growing like for this past 1 year or so.
Yeah. Well, so my best pull in competition was 350, and that was back in nationals. And then at NAPF, my deadlift was tracking to be even better than it was at nationals. And even now, I feel like my deadlift is the strongest it's ever been.
So you're feeling better with them every week.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of it is just proper fatigue management. So as long as I can manage my fatigue well, then my deadlift will show up.
And then going back to this 2025, what are your plans? Like we have nationals in 8 weeks or so. We then have worlds. We have Sheffield next year. What's your strategy in this way?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'm competing at nationals in April 5th, as a 93. And in terms of my competition, I mean, there are a lot of people who are ridiculously strong in the 93s. And especially at this level, it's no longer just who has the biggest top end. It's who can go 9 for 9 and who can play the game well. And so it's this balance between playing the game of powerlifting while also being the strongest lifter on the platform at this level. So we've got Brandon Petrie, of course, returning national champion. We've got Jonathan Kaiko, who's, I believe, 2-time world champion. I'm pretty sure he's won 2 worlds, or it's either 2 or 3. And we've got Jamar Royster. We've got, I don't know if Jawan Garrison is able to do it. I don't know. There was some mishap with some like PED situation or something like that. I'm not totally clear on, so I don't know if he's going to be there. But if he is, that's another huge competitor. There's a kid that's coming up that I saw. I think his name is Jack Reynolds, although I may be completely wrong about that. He's like 17, and I don't know how close he is to being like us, but he's definitely over 850 on total right now. What's that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's him, and who else am I missing? I know I'm definitely missing at least a couple others. Yeah, off the top of my head, I might be forgetting a couple, but yeah. So those are right there. Are just that's a major playing field right there of like hardcore competitors.
So you have to win nationals and then you can go to worlds. Is it?
Yeah. So the one who places first with the highest total will go to worlds.
And what's the number you think that would secure the spot? Like what total you have to hit?
Like a guaranteed number.
Yeah, like 10%.
Guaranteed like 100%. I'm gonna say 935. If you wanted to play it a little risky, I would say 925. And if you wanted to kind of just hope that people have bad days and you have a great day, 915. But I don't think that anything under 925 is going to guarantee you at like a win, even close to, really. And truthfully, I think 935 is going to be the number for sure, because you've got Jamar, who's going to be able to squat over 800. You've got Kaiko, who's obviously formidable, has always gone 9 for 9 and benches like 550 and has a pretty strong pull. Brandon Petrie, can't count him out. He just shows up. He comes in clutch. And realistically, like I don't remember where his squat is at, but I think it's around 700. And his bench, if his bench shows up, he's right at that 500 mark, and he's got a retarded pull. Like, it's just crazy. You know what I mean? It's huge. So, yeah, you're talking about a lot of lifters here who have the potential to total 10 times body weight. It's just a matter of getting it all together.
And in your specific case, how do you plan a strategy, taking for granted that you will be supposedly not going to pull the last in your flight? Like, how do you plan the whole thing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. So in short, just simply be the strongest. I don't think then you have to be concerned about it, right? You don't win with a deadlift, you win with a total. And so, in my opinion, if by my second pull, even if my second deadlift is only 720 pounds, or in kilos, let's say my second pull is like 335, right? That's not that much. But if my second pull with 335 secures a 925 total, well, now who gives a shit what anybody else pulls in that third, because I'm just going to load whatever I need. Slash, maybe I don't even take it, honestly. I mean, knowing me, I'm still going to take it. But you get my point. So it's not the last deadlift that counts, it's the total that counts. And so if you can secure a massive total on even your opener deadlift, do it. That's great. And that means be the strongest, most perfectly executed lifter on the day. And it's much easier said than done. It's so much easier said than done, obviously, but that is the strategy. For me personally, I don't study my competitors. I don't try and follow up on their lifts. I don't even, I genuinely, for example, if Jonathan Keiko or Brandon Petrie or any of these other lifters came up to me in the warm-up room and said, "Hey, Gavin, I forgot my chalk at home. Can I borrow your chalk?" I'm going to give them my chalk. I want them to be as best as they possibly can be on that platform, because the version of them that I want the chance to beat is the best version of them. And in turn, because I respect them and like I said, if they beat me, I want it to be the version of me that tried the absolute best I possibly could. Right. Because that's the idea of honor and respect in competition. And so yeah. So again, in short, I genuinely, I want the best for my competitors. In my mind, I'm not trying to chip them or play games with them. Like, you load what you think you can load. I'm going to load what I think I can load. And if I miss, it's a risk I was willing to take. I'm never going to go with this mindset of like, well, what's the minimum necessary? Can I win on body weight? Can I do that? If that's how it plays out, that's totally fine. I'm not against that. But at the same time, I'm here to be the strongest lifter in the world. When I won Junior Worlds, granted it's Junior Worlds, but I won by a lot, right? And even then, I really felt like, and I had won best lifter at that meet, I still felt like, man, dude, I'm such a wimp, because my total was 40 kilos less than what I was capable of. And so I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't deserve this. Like, this is, you know what I mean? Because I think once you get to a certain point, you're competing with yourself. It's not about anybody else. And I do believe that if you beat yourself, you're probably going to beat everybody else.
And talking about that, thinking about thinking about every block, every session, knowing that you have to hit 930, 925, 935, doesn't matter. What's your approach with the loads? Like, you have a plan to hit that load that week, every week, or do you just go with the flow?
Yeah, I definitely have a plan for sure. Even this far out, I'm going in knowing what I plan to hit on my opener, my second, and my third. So obviously, depending on how training goes and how I'm feeling that day, we will adapt, but we always have a plan. And to prepare for that it's no different than anything else, man. It's like showing up to work. It's okay. What are my routines? What are my processes? What are my systems? How do I need to execute to make sure that I am being consistent? How do I need to execute to make sure that I'm meeting a particular standard? How do I fix certain mistakes I've made in the past, improve on things that I'm already good at? These are all the questions you'd be asking anyway. That's the preparation. And in terms of mentally preparing for it, well, powerlifting is one of the few sports where you get to practice exactly how you plan to play. Exactly how you plan to play, right? So take advantage of that. If it's the music you choose, if it's the thoughts you think, if it's the equipment you wear, you can control all of that, right? And so because you can control that, shame on you if you choose not to and then are unprepared on game day. And I'm not talking at anyone. I've been in that position where I did not control certain things that were within my control. And then on game day, I'm like, fuck, what do I do? I'm kind of blindsided. That didn't need to happen, right? I should have taken that into account. Last Nationals is a perfect example. I shouldn't have missed weight. Even though I had only a 5-week turnaround, doesn't change the fact that I should have been more in check with how much over my class I was, right? And so these are things that, unfortunately, lessons you'll learn as you fail and go through some things. But that's how you prepare, man. It's exactly how you want things to go on game day is exactly how you should be practicing. And then the last thing I'll say on that too is, you had mentioned like some of these guys can play it safe. No, the fuck they can't. They cannot play it safe, because if I get that third squat, they're fucked, right? If they played it safe, now they have to load more than what they're capable of on that final pull, and I have to push them and I have to apply pressure, right? And that's the name of it. So no matter what, if they want to be conservative and they think that they can play safe around someone like me, who's willing to come for a fucking throat, like I will go all in on everything. So you have to be very careful. If you let your guard down, then yes, it's going to become very easy for me to get to a position where you can't catch up, right? Now, the flip side is I play risky. So yeah, you could play safe and maybe it pans out for you and you find out you never needed to load whatever you needed on that squat. But to be honest with you, I respect people who know what they're capable of. I don't mind people who stay within their bounds. That's totally fine. But it's a national championship. If it's a world championship, if it's Sheffield, you're supposed to be the best in the fucking world. So earn that. What decision would a champion make, right? And are we here to push limits? Are we here to break barriers? Or are we here to be conservative and play it safe? Everybody's got their own method, and I understand that. And maybe that's why I haven't won a world championship yet. I'm stubborn and I'm thinking, you got to go all in and whatever. But I don't know if I'd be happy with myself if I won. Let's say I'm capable of a 950 kilo total, and all it took was a 900 kilo total to win. So I do 900. I don't think I'd be happy leaving that meet knowing I only did 900. Even if I won, what does the winning mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? Whereas if I went for 950 and only ended up with 889 and I lost the whole thing, I'd be happier with that, knowing like, you know what? I went for it. I went all in and I went for it because that's my story. That's who I am. And I think there is a balance. So not to run off on a tangent, but yeah, I do think that it's important at this level. Lifters will realize if you can play it safe, especially if you have the deadlift in your back pocket, but know that if these other lifters who are dangerous up front, meaning that they have big squats, if they get those squats, you missed your opportunity to even out the playing field. And you're going to now have a little bit more pressure than you're probably used to going into deadlifts.
And regarding this, we have like two ways to confront competition. Like you can go to secure the bag, to secure 2.5 kilos every lift, and then get that 9 on 9. Or you can go full. You can go and try and load what you think your top end thing. And then, well, you can go home with a 609, with a 509. If you have issues with depth or anything. Do you think we need more of those? I don't know how to say, like tryhards, like those who want the most out of it?
I think it's I think for the sake of the sport and winning a championship, it's not the technically smartest thing to do. But I think in terms of your spirit and what kind of athlete you're going to be, I will always lean on that side. I like to think of it as like a fighter, right? So if you're a fighter, if you're a boxer, it's not about being the most aggressive, angry, hard-hitting person in the ring. You have to be calm enough and disciplined enough to control yourself, right? And to be able to actually study and observe what's happening in front of you. And then you can respond accordingly. So there can be this balance. There has to be this balance. However, in terms of your will and just how much you're willing to give and just how much you're willing to sacrifice and risk, that's something that I believe wins championships over time. So there's a lot of winners, right? But there's not a lot of champions. We're talking about champions, somebody who's creating a legacy, a story. Like, let me ask you this. Let's say we have two knights, right? So people with swords and shields, okay? Two knights. Both knights are going to go into separate caves. In one cave, there's a dragon, like a really big dragon. In the other cave, there's a sheep. Behind both of those animals or creatures, there's the same pot of gold. Okay, so the same reward. One knight goes down the cave that has the dragon and slays the dragon. One knight goes and slays the sheep. Remember, same reward. Which knight do you respect more? Which knight's story inspires you more? The guy who went to slay the sheep, definitely smarter, 100%. We get it. He risked less and got the same reward. But the guy who fought the dragon is probably one of the baddest motherfuckers in the entire realm. And now he's prepared for anything. If he walks down a cave with a sheep, forget it. That's easy. That's nothing. He wants the challenge. He wants something that's going to make him feel alive, that's going to make him grow, right? So I've always been inspired by that story, the guy who chooses to face the dragon and slay the dragon. And the reality is it's a fucking dragon. So sometimes you're going to die. Sometimes it's not going to work out. That's okay. I would prefer that over just constantly slaying sheep. So that's my mindset. It's a balance. You have to be calculated. The guy who goes to fight the dragon is still being calculated. He's not walking in without a sword and a shield. He's going in prepared. He's going in ready. He's going to be calculated. He's going to be smart. He knows what he's up against, but he's going to meet it full force, head on. Even if he feels the fear, he's charging forwards. Whereas the other guy, again, same thing. He's equipped, he's got the tools, whatever, but the challenge is just not as great. So it's nothing to discount the approach of trying to play it safe and be super conservative. I just feel that there's a difference between winning and becoming a champion. And in order to become a champion, I do think that that requires betting on yourself more than most, taking massive risks, and just seeing how far your body can go, testing the limits. A lot of people can finish a marathon. A lot of people can run a mile. But the one that sticks out to me is the guy who was the first guy to break, a sub 4 minute mile. That's crazy. Then all of a sudden, tons of people could do it, right? Nobody could do it. Everybody thought it was impossible until one person does it. That's championship. And so that's what I aspire to do and to be in the sport.
And keeping with your metaphor, maybe Sheffield is like this cave that wards a dragon, the place where lifters have to go all in to break the world records and get the money and stuff. But maybe IPF, maybe Europeans, maybe nationals there in the US, maybe worlds, is becoming like this ship thing, because you have situations in which you don't need to even push to win. It depends on who you're competing against and stuff. But for example, Evie Corrigan, these past worlds, she didn't need her last pull to win, and she had more. She had more than her second, but she didn't even try. She just picked the load and went there and say hi to the referees and stuff. But she didn't even try because she didn't need. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I agree to the extent that look, just because this is how I think doesn't mean that it's the right way. So I want to be clear on that. I know that this is not necessarily the right way. It's not the smart way. I'm not an open world champion yet. I have every intention of becoming one in 2025, but I don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to this, right? But I still stand by what I believe. What I will say is this: both Worlds and Sheffield are dragons. The dragon is not the competition itself. It's actually what you attempt to do. So, for example, in that case, Evie chose to slay a sheep. That would be the example of that. Whereas, let's say she goes for the third pull and she tries to pull a world record total, even if it's just by a small margin, like a chip, that would be her choosing to slay a dragon, even though it doesn't make sense, right? And so that, again, that to me is where that's what inspires me. That's what moves me. I'm not saying she did anything wrong, and I'm certainly not discounting it. What she did was smart. I mean, why risk injury? Why do this? But when you start to think about it, and again, this is just my philosophy, and I know I'm fucked up, so I don't mean any disrespect by this to any athletes. Like I said, I think what they choose to do is very smart. I'm just the idiot. In my mind, nobody ever is forcing me to do any of this. So when you say like, well, I don't need to come out for the third and try and break a world record, I could just do that at Sheffield. Yeah, but you never even needed to start powerlifting to begin with. So why did you? What was it about powerlifting that moved you enough to go and compete? And then not only that, I think Evie won the first Sheffield, right? So you have that caliber of lifter. What motivated you to do that? There's something internal that doesn't follow any rules, that doesn't listen to anybody who's a coach and who's a handler who tells you what they think is right. There's something in you that moved you to make certain choices to then become literally one of the greatest powerlifters in the world. And so that's what I want to answer to. That's what I want to speak to. That's what I want to make those decisions, because that's what moves me. Dude, I don't like these titles and shit that you win. Like, I get it. I only won Junior Worlds. I felt the emptiest and lowest I've ever felt in my life after winning that. And I get it. Like I said, it's just Junior Worlds. But at that time, that was like my open worlds. And I remember thinking like, this is it? Like, this is it. Like, yeah, it's cool. It's great. But who gives a fuck? Like, this is it. So then I realized, I see, it's not about the outcome. It's who I become in pursuit of the outcome. That's what's going to make me hungry. And guess what? The more you take on, the more you have to fight through, the more you risk, The more failure you face, the more you grow. The less you do of all those things, the less you grow. And that's just the truth. We can't get around that. So that's when I realized, like, man, I'm living now for just to see how far I can push my body. And what I think the beautiful part is this: when you do that, you will have no choice but to become so fucking good at what you do, no one's coming close. And I think that's the special piece. So what I would like, and I said this in my pre-Sheffield YouTube video, I would love to see lifters like Jesus, like Amanda, who really don't have much competition in their class, create such a competitor within themselves that they are just sharpening themselves over and over because they see their world record, let's say, as their competitors. And they need to go way beyond that. They need that kind of pressure. And like I said, I mean, people look at the 83s, the 93s, are like, how the fuck is the world record going up by this much, this fast? It's because look at the competition. You've got no choice. It's fight or flight. It's either you're going to survive or you're just not even going to compete. And so part of survival means, okay, I got to add 25 kilos to my total in fucking 6 months. Let's do it. You know what I mean? And you may not hit that goal, but you'll add 15, you'll add 10, and it's 10 more. It's 10 more that you've added that you wouldn't have added if you did not have that pressure, if you did not have that competition. There's a reason why pressure makes diamonds. And so I believe in all of that. Sorry, I keep going on a rant, but you got me fired up with these questions.
And how do you like to plan like the game day thing? How do you approach that in a big competition?
Well, yeah, I mean, really, it just depends on like what my goal is for the competition. So like, for example, if it's worlds, okay, well, I'll give you this example. This is probably the better one for nationals, right? In my mind, it's like, okay, I would love to total well over 930 kilos at nationals, but I may not need that, right? So in my mind, here's my compromise. How about I total whatever I need to win on my second deadlift, on my second squat, right? That way, I have the freedom to do whatever the fuck I want on my thirds. And then I don't have to hear any bullshit from anyone, right? And so that's how I compromise it, right? So again, in my mind, it's like you can have all three, or you can have all the outcomes that you want, but you just have to be willing to take that risk. Going into nationals for sure, you know, I know it's going to be very tight, and I may not be in a position to pull for the win on my second, you know, but why not try and be strong enough to do that? You know, I think that would be the harder option, but it's the easier option.
And then you think that since powerlifting is organized around numbers, around nine lifts, around totals, and the way competition is structured and so on, do you think we are inherently promoting these attitudes of staying in the pocket if you can, like guarding some kilos, thinking about the next 2 years, hitting world records, and getting the chip, getting the money, like for how it is structured, someone like you is not within the structure because you're thinking against it. You're thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about lower risk. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I will Yeah, I will say that there's very few sports that operate similarly, in my opinion. Like the sports that are mainstream that we enjoy watching, let's say football, baseball, basketball, hockey, and then you can even take some of the Olympic sports. One of the most popular Olympic sports is track, right? So like sprinting, stuff like that. Do you think Usain Bolt is thinking, let me be a half second slower here because I don't need to risk a hamstring pull when I can just be a half second slow? Like that's just what? Do you think in a Super Bowl tournament you have? I think this year it's going to be what is it? Kansas and the Eagles or something like that. I don't really watch football anymore, but whoever it is, do you think they're thinking like, let me be merciful here and just score as few points as possible? That's not the competitor's mindset. That's not it. In fact, it's the opposite. We're going to do this respectfully, but you're going to get fucking buried. And we're, like I said, we're going to compete respectfully with honor and integrity. However, we are coming to win. And if winning requires burying you, then that's what will happen. And so that's the competitive edge. That's what drives progress. That's what drives historical moments. I think Sheffield does a phenomenal job of that. Worlds, look, like I said, I understand it. I understand that there are ways to win, more quote unquote, let's say optimal ways to win. And that's fine. What I think is beautiful is that sometimes you'll have weight classes where in order to win, you have to break the world record. So like the 93s would be a great example. Even the 83s now, right? In order for someone to win, they have to either total the world record or do better. And what I will say too is that Sheffield now creates an incentive for world champions to still do pretty well because they have to still total within a certain percentage of the world record. So they can't just like show up and not do anything. You know, they still have to do pretty well. There's still a minimum, which is kind of sad, but at least you're still seeing a world champion athlete lift world champion numbers, you know?
Now I'd like to dive a little bit more into deeper waters. This past week, one of my athletes asked me this question about if I thought their hero's journey was a lonely one. You know what I mean? And I've been thinking about it. I would like to know your point. So, do you think the hero's journey, quote unquote, is a lonely one?
So it's a tricky question to answer. What I will say is this: no one can walk the road except you. However, you do not have to be alone and you do not have to do it alone if you choose not to. And what I mean by that is I aim to be a follower of Christ, right? I am very far from perfect, but I try my best to follow Christ. And so because of that, I'm not walking this journey alone. In fact, a lot of it, I'm not even carving myself. I'm being led. I go where I'm called, right? I'm called to a higher purpose. I have a seed of greatness planted within me, just as you have. And I'm trying to answer that call by walking this path. Now, it is true. The path won't get walked unless I walk it. So in that sense, yeah, you're alone. Even if you have the sponsors and your family and people are literally holding your hand, you still have to walk forward, right? But whether or not you do it alone is completely up to you because Jesus doesn't kick down the door. He knocks. You have to open the door. You have to invite him in. That's how he does it. And so it's up to you. You know, it's completely up to you if you want to welcome Jesus into your life, welcome God into your life, and then be led. Personally, I spent a lot of my life refusing to open the door and honestly, even antagonizing Christ and antagonizing the person behind the door, super skeptical all the time, and rightfully so. I mean, there's a lot of things to be skeptical of. But then over time, as I've grown, as I've learned, as I've failed, and as I have gone through things and have suffered and I've gone through a lot, I started to realize just how powerful and necessary it was to walk with him, capital H, right? So to answer that question, you have to walk it alone, but you do not have to experience it alone. And that's probably the most accurate answer I can give. Like I said, that guy in the cave who's going to fight the dragon, yeah, man, there's nobody else who can fight that dragon for him. There's people who can give him advice. There's people who can give him directions, maybe help upgrade his equipment, you know. But in terms of actually fighting that dragon, he has to do that himself. However, there's a greater power that literally lives within him if he's open to that, if he's receptive to that. And and that's a choice that we have to make.
And do you recall a specific moment in which you had this sort of alignment, this sort of hearing the knock of Jesus, or was it more like a was it more like a process, or was it more like a ongoing thing?
It's it's been more of like a process. So it's a journey, you know, it's been a process. It wasn't like one moment, boom, switch, now I'm a follower. It was a process, but there were a lot of things going on in my personal life. You start to realize, dude, speaking of alone, like you can't do it alone. There's so much, and the weight is so fucking heavy, dude. Like it's so heavy, and there's so much, and life is hard, and things happen, and you don't have the strength. There's a scripture, actually, I just read it in the pre-Sheffield video. It's Hannah's prayer, I believe, or Hannah's letter, I forget, but it's in Samuel. And one of the verses, I think it's verse 9, it ends with, "For not by might shall man prevail." In other words, not by your strength will you be able to prevail. That's not how this works. And so that's powerful. And it's so fucking real, dude. Anybody who's attempted to do anything great, will tell you that that's the truth. Is that, man, dude, sometimes you sit there and you're like, how the fuck am I going to do this? I don't know. Everything's falling down around me and I don't have the strength to do this. And so that's what he provides, is that strength and that peace. And he asks you to give him that weight, to give him those burdens. And so to answer your question, it was a process. There was a lot of things going on in my personal life, but to stick to the powerlifting context, dude, I kept fucking failing. I kept falling short. And it's not that God is like some genie and I'm like, hey, look, I'd really like to win. I'll believe in you if you make me win. That's not it at all. I realized, dude, that I was defeating myself. So I'll give you a personal example, right? And then I'll shut the fuck up because I know I'm talking a lot. So personal example, Malta World Championship. I've told this story before on YouTube, but Malta World Championship, I had the strength to win. Excuse me. I was coming off of, I believe, Sheffield, pretty sure, the first Sheffield. So I was strong. I felt ready. I had the strength to win. Fly in, week out, and for whatever reason, dude, I feel very like alone, very empty, very not weak, but shallow and hollow, right? It's just a weird feeling. And my family was flying out, so I wasn't physically alone, but I was alone. I felt alone. And I had no energy. I was tired. I couldn't, it was my mind, right? I'm worried. I got this fear, this doubt. What if I can't? What if I go? All this bullshit. Get to the day of the meet, right? I go to sweat out the remaining pounds of water that I have to make weight. And one of my biggest competitors is in the sauna there, of course, right? Now, I like him. There's nothing against him. It's just like the fact that, okay, biggest meet. And out of all of the competitors internationally, the one guy who's in this sauna with me alone right now, just before we're hours away from competing, is my number one competitor, right? So it's funny how that happens, right? And so then boom, all of a sudden things start to seep in. The enemy starts working in you, right? The spiritual warfare. So that didn't even really bother me. I walk out of the sauna. This is what bothered me. I go to check my phone, dude, and I swear I never get Instagram notifications because I have it turned off, right? I had an Instagram notification. The name of the person who messaged me was the devil. That's what it said. And right then and there, I knew. And I'm telling you, man, like people will be like, who gives a fuck? Like, this is stupid, whatever. You have to live this shit enough to see these patterns happen over and over for you to really believe it. Looking back, dude, I mean, it's insane. The spiritual warfare that was going on, the only person who could have beaten me in Malta was myself. And that's what happened. I defeated myself before I even gave myself the chance. And that kept happening over and over throughout my entire powerlifting career. And so that's when I decided going into NAPF. So I was like, fuck all of this. I'm all in on God. I'm all in on Christ. I believe, I understand his promises, and I know it's not about the outcome, dude. It's not about any of that, because God has the ability to turn bad into good. We all have free will. If a jury member wants to stand up and say, fuck Gavin, we're overturning his shit, they can do that. God's not going to prevent that. That's free will, right? That goes against the law. So I know that there's so much that's outside of my control. So it's not about that. It's about me. What can I control? What's my effort? What's my self-belief, my faith? And I trust God's love that not only are great things meant for me, but no matter what happens, that's bad, that's negative, that's terrible, whatever, he can turn bad into good. So I now can trust no matter what happens, I'm good. I'm good. And if I win, guess what? Next day is day one training anyway. If I lose, guess what? Next day is day one training anyway. And so Christ strengthened my spirit, my mindset, and has helped me win the battle against the enemy. Because, and this is the last thing I'll say here, the enemy, Satan, the devil, however you want to call it, he has no power over you. Okay? The only way he can beat you is through you. And if you think about it, it shows up in your relationships. It shows up in your sport. It shows up at your work in all of these different ways. And he's working in everyone. But the only way he can do it is to feed you these lies. So what are some of those lies? What if I miss depth? What if I can't do it? What if I'm not that strong? Everybody hates me. Everybody talks shit about me. Nobody thinks I belong here because I got here through the alternate spot. I don't deserve to be here. Sheffield twice, but I was a wild card. How many chances am I going to get? All these things you're thinking about. That's not the truth. That's the voice of the enemy. That's not what God says. What God says, if it's not of power, sound mind, and love, it's not from him. Are any of those things power, sound mind, and love? No. So you have to get in tune with that. So for me, I know this is a long ass answer. I apologize, but you're asking phenomenal questions. Um, it's it wasn't one moment, but it's a bunch of those types of moments that woke me up. And I realized, like, if I want to be a true champion and if I want to start winning, but not only that, become someone who's worth something to somebody, then I better start sharpening my mindset. And that's when I made that leap. Um, and ever since then, things have been completely different.
Thank you for the long ass answer. Appreciate that. Then going back to ordinary life, to normal things.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about this past Sheffield? Did you like it? Do you think it's too long?
Definitely not too long. I think part of the cool thing about Sheffield is that it's designed so that athletes can have the best performance of their life. It's long. They've got designated platforms for you in the warm-up area, plenty of help. They've got some like food, some snacks, some drinks and stuff in the back. Um, the crowd alone, dude, like, you're talking about 2,500 people there cheering you on. It's really hard to not do well. Look, if you're injured, that's different. If you're sick, that's different. But it's really just those two things, I think, barring any sort of extreme personal circumstance, you're going to do extremely well there. Um, I would say even like the judging is a little bit more lenient than Worlds, I would say. And if people argue with that, I would just say that if nothing else, you've got lights, you've got a dark room, 2,500 people behind you, cameras, music. You're going to tell me that these judges and referees can focus better in that than they can in a stale world championship environment where it's elevator music, bright fucking hospital lights, and barely anybody in the crowd? Right, exactly. So I'm human too. So I understand that, look, it's going to be harder for you to judge more accurately, whatever. So I do think it might be a little bit more lenient in some cases, although I kind of got hit with the non-lenient side, but sometimes. But it is what it is. That's powerlifting. So yeah, I think the meet's awesome. I thought that the previous Sheffield, like the one that just happened, was cool. I don't know, dude. I had a couple people hit me up that were saying like this one felt a little more stale, like if that's the right word. A little bit, yeah, a little bit more like plain and a little boring. But you know, that's tough. I don't know if that's SBD's fault. I don't know. It's hard because as an athlete, part of your job when people say that they want powerlifting to blow up, but what they don't realize is that doesn't mean that you get to just do what you were doing. When powerlifting blows up, you now have to be a showman because you have to sell tickets. This is now a business. You have to sell quote unquote like pay-per-view, right? Like UFC. There are some phenomenal fighters, but the UFC probably won't sign them and won't give them any fights if they're not going to sell any tickets, right? And so that's part of it now. And so I think that that's what people are starting to realize is some powerlifters might just simply need to work on their stage presence. And I think that would help.
In fact, I think next Sheffield is already sold out. I think I just saw it on Instagram that there are no tickets left.
It is, which is crazy. I mean, I know it's the last one in that venue, so that's probably helping. And SPD was really smart in that they started selling tickets right after this Sheffield. So while everything is as hot as it's going to be, people are excited about it, talking about it. People who just went are still like hungover on the buzz of being there. I guarantee you at least 70% of ticket sales are resells from people who went just now, So it's genius. That was super smart of them to do.
And do you have any opinions about judging, about referees? Did you see any call you don't completely agree?
You know what, dude? It's tough because if you talk about one person, then you have to talk about all of them. So there's that. But then there's also the piece too where I can't hear the refs. I can't hear down commands. I can't hear any of that. And I'm now reliant on what I see on camera, which isn't always like it's not always as obvious as people think. I also think that a lot of athletes and referees are losing sight of like what the rule states, and I've said this before, which is when in doubt, benefit goes to the lifter. So if it's a squat, if it's a deadlift, if there, and this is how I would say it, if there's 51% doubt, meaning just above quote unquote controlling interest, if there's 51% doubt, just give it to the lifter. And I understand that sounds super lenient, but that's what the rule says. Like, I didn't write the rule, you know what I mean? So it's kind of hard for me to be like, well, this guy's squat, but then this guy's deadlift, it's like, it's tough. Like, for example, and I don't want anyone to come at me because I'm just answering the fucking question, but people will say that Russell's third deadlift was iffy, right? He should have gotten that. I have no idea. Like, I don't know if it's good or not. To me, I would have given it to him 100%. He lifted it, he held it, it came down. You can see a little bit of that bar roll, but do you see what I'm saying? We're going to get into arguing over this. Like, that means that there's doubt. So the benefit goes to him. However, I would say his second squat should not have counted. He got 3 white lights, and I screen recorded it and saw the depth. And I'm thinking to myself, like, dude, it's crazy, because if you compare his second squat to, let's say, one of Emil's squats, and Emil was getting like 2 whites, 1 red, and and I've thought about my squats. It's not consistent, right? But again, that's the sport, so it's okay. So I still think, sure, give it to Russ. That's totally fine. If it's doubtful, just give it to him. That's totally fine. What I don't like is when there's like an inconsistency in judging. So, like I said, if you talk about one, you have to talk about all of them. For every lift that shouldn't have counted, there's going to be lifts that should have. It's always going to be back and forth. I think there needs to be like a whole rewiring of the judging referee system.
And with this last Emil's pool, I have this feeling that he was sure it wasn't a good lift, by the way, by his face, by the way he lets the bar down roll. Like, for the spectator, for the people who are watching, this is hard to understand. These kind of situations.
It's
And I'm good
it's
with
tough,
and I'm
man.
good with the good lift. It's not about that.
Yeah, it's tough because in powerlifting, these types of things happen all the time. And, to a spectator, or even a referee or a juror, which is a little bit worse, you think like, okay, it happened, it's done, on to the next. But to a lifter, this is everything. We've worked so hard for this one moment, for 9 attempts, and I may never be back. I could die tomorrow. So it's like, this means that much to me. And it's tough, because, like, Gustav, I was talking to Gustav, and he said that his handler or his helper didn't listen to him, put in 360 when it should have been like 362 and a half or 365, which he was upset.
I had this feeling while I was watching.
Yeah. So again, another moment like that happened to me in Malta, when my handler put in for my second attempt 310 when it should have been like 327 and a half or 325 or something like that. So these things happen, right? And again, first Sheffield, that third squat was overturned, which was a very controversial call. Had that squat not been overturned, we could have potentially placed first. So, you're talking about decisions, micro decisions, whether it be on the athlete side, the handler side, or the referee or juror side, that change the entire trajectory of a meet. And you have to accept that going into the competition. That's the price. That's one of the prices that you pay until it gets changed or fixed or improved. What I will say is this: I don't think anything should be taken away from any of these lifters at all. I think we can argue about what's legitimate, what's not. But here's my problem. I have people tell me, oh, well, NAPFs where you did your 2 open world records, they're illegitimate. Okay, so then if you're going to say that, then we can't say Sheffield's legit. Like, you have to keep it consistent, right? It can't count for one person then and not for the other, right? Because the jurors and the referees at NAPFs, the same level that you would get at Worlds or Sheffield. So that's the only thing. I think that we shouldn't take anything away from these lifters. If Emil got it, he got it. It's done. Like, it's it. Otherwise, don't fucking bitch about all these other competitions, all these other lifters. And it doesn't work like that. Same thing with Russ's situation, with the deadlift. Like, it's part of the sport, man. It is what it is. And it sucks because I've been on the shitty end of it a ton. But, like I said, until it gets fixed or improved, it is what it is. So what I would say is, like I said, you can argue. I'm totally fine with people arguing like, oh, he should have gotten that lift. But I'm very skeptical of people who will immediately argue like, oh, he shouldn't have gotten that lift. Because again, at the end of the day, it's in order to make that argument, there has to be, that means that there's doubt surrounding it. And if that's the case, then the benefit of the doubt should have went to the lifter anyway, which means he should have gotten it anyway.
So you think we have work to be done with the judging itself, with rules themselves, like they are not clear enough for the referees.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. As would be in any sport, I don't think that the video replay helps. In fact, I think it hurts. I don't think that that was the answer, because what it does is it makes things, quote unquote, let's say super specific, right? Okay. But then it becomes kind of subjective. And it's not that the video is subjective, it's that the rule becomes subjective, right? And so it's tough, man. It's like, and again, it makes it inconsistent. It makes it completely inconsistent. I think that there's a lot of changes that need to be made to the judging, to the refereeing, for sure. And, look, I'm going to be honest with you. There are some people who, whenever I talk about it, they kind of get upset because, I don't volunteer really. I don't ref, I don't have any certifications or anything like that. And as of right now, I don't intend to, and it's nothing against that. I respect and love the fact that we have people who are willing to do that, because that's what makes the sport go round. For me though, I compete for a different reason, and my idea of giving back is very different. My idea of giving back is trying to grow the sport, inspire people, get them involved, get them to want to become world champions themselves. That's where my work is. And I think we're all needed. So again, I may not be a referee. I may not have ever sat in a chair to take the exam. And so I understand that, people got to take my suggestions with a grain of salt, but at the same time, I do still think it means something, because it is coming from an athlete who's competed, so, but yeah, I definitely do think changes need to be made.
And now going back to this 2025, let's suppose you have like the best year of your life, then you go to nationals, like what numbers you hit, like best year ever,
I mean,
period.
Best year of my life. All right, let me add it up real quick. Hold on a second, because I know what it would be, but I just got to make sure that this is what I think it is. Okay, and I'm just going to convert it to kilos right now real quick. 975. 975 would be like top end of what I'm aiming for by the end of 2025, maybe like early 2026. Yeah. I think if I figure out just a couple more programming things and technique things, I think we'll be in a really good spot. I've made a switch to flats on squats that I think will hopefully pay off. And bench, we've made some small tweaks that I think is going to have our bench like really fire up. And then deadlift, of course, if we can squeeze more out of deadlift still, then we'll be in a great spot.
Do flats help you handle your fatigue better?
No, it actually impacts my fatigue even more. But I switched to flats because my depth has been basically the same no matter what shoes I wear. So the shoes don't really affect my depth much, which kind of sucks, but there's that. The second bit is I just felt more stronger and stable in flats than I do in heels. And I can take a little bit of a wider stance. And then the third bit is what was happening with my squat is as I squat down, I enter some degree of healthy amounts of extension, right? The problem was as I fire up, and you can see it on any of my super heavy struggle squats. So third attempt Sheffield, third attempt NAPF, my ass will kind of shoot up a little bit. And then I basically have to fight with only my posterior chain to get the weight up, right? I don't really have my quads because my shins are practically vertical with the floor, or perpendicular to the floor, right? So my shins are basically vertical. So the problem is the heels accentuate that. So what I found was it's easier for me to grind and it's easier for me to stay in position with flats. It's harder on my hips. It's harder on my legs for sure. But I also have found too that I think any amount of like quality strength work I do with squats now is going to have a super transfer to my deadlift. So, we'll see what happens. I may not stick with it, but for now we'll probably stick with flats.
So I understand you're trying to find more out of your quads.
It's not so much trying to find more of my quads. It's because I actually get a little bit less because of the position. It's more so that I can open up my hips more. And because I'm not as far forward because there's no heel, whenever I do have a grind, my hips don't shoot all the way back and I'm not super hunched. My chest doesn't collapse as easily. The other thing too is like in the heels, sometimes it can be really, really awkward. You just find yourself in these really weird positions. Like you can even watch this past Sheffield. Anybody who is in, like, for example, Shell, right? Kel, he's in the, I've squatted in the heels he squats in. If you watch his third attempt squat, like it looks really ugly. Like he's really strong. He powered through it, but he was super hunched over. And some of that's leverages, but you can tell like one leg was all the way in, one leg wasn't. And I do think that heels have a lot to do with that.
So taking your last numbers, you said you better be comfortable if you want to hit 360 in squats.
Yeah, definitely not comfortable. Definitely not comfortable.
Thanks a lot for coming, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, dude. No, thank you, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really happy I had the opportunity and the time to do this.
Really hoping to see you hit them 970, 975 this next
Me
year.
too. Me too, brother.
Bye, man.
I'll see you later, dog. Bye.